is coming. War is never over. Once begun, wars grow. That's what they do. I discovered an author named Matthew Bracken who wrote a trilogy depicting the descent of the U.S. into serious civil war and dissolution. I know this is a bit of a cottage industry now, everybody predicting the outbreak of violence, but it's pretty well thought out. And so, because I talk about these topics on this channel, you should check it out. Why is war now unstoppable? First of all, it's not unstoppable. The descent and the headlong sort of dissolution of Western society into all-out war is stoppable, but it won't be stopped. And here's why. Two reasons. First of all, in science, for example, it's widely understood that for new ideas to gain traction, the old guard actually has to die off. And that's partly what's going on in Western culture, Western civilization as well. The imbeciles running US policy, and Europe, of course, right? Special shout out to Germany and the UK and France, and right? These people are trapped in a kind of nostalgic, but in the US in particular, the leadership, so-called, I'm being generous with that term, are trapped in a kind of nostalgic fantasy where they're still fighting World War II and we're the heroes and the good guys, et cetera, et cetera. It's a kind of mythology that everybody has bought into. They insist straight up, and you better not point out anything to the contrary, by the way, because I've tried, that the US is a kind of unmitigated force for good and that we will prevail because of the rightness of our cause, et cetera, right? Even the most biased observer should really question whether those assumptions are actually still true. The US is, shall we say, disliked by a good portion of the rest of the world. And here I mean the US government is disliked. I have never encountered people who have hatred for the average American, no matter where I go. And even though I do fit in as I travel, nonetheless, right, I do run into places where kind of seen as a kind of interesting phenomenon, right? Because you grew up in the United States and people want to know what that was like. And so they study you very carefully, very often. But the US is not liked. And here I mean the US government is not liked and not appreciated by a lot of the rest of the world. And there's no secret to why that's so. We veto any resolution that would put a stop to the slaughter in Gaza. We sanction and bully any nation, right, and any group of people for any reason we deem worthwhile. And the US government long ago stopped being the light of the world, right, that it once was. If you think offshore structures like where to bank, how to invest in foreign real estate, and where to set up your foreign trust are difficult or complicated, they're not. That's not the hard part of creating an international lifestyle. The hardest part is the decision to go. That's why I wrote Secrets of the Expat Adventure, to share with you a deeply personal view of what happens when you decide to cast off the chains of a normal life full of predictable outcomes. I don't want to spoil the ending for you, but you quickly discover yourself living your best life, the life you were meant to live, instead of the one you're stuck with. Across 156 pages, I'll share the incredible adventure I've enjoyed because of my decision to leave my old life behind and create an international lifestyle. I lay out for you the consequences of remaining in a life or location where everything is familiar, contrasting that with the almost magical growth and gain that is possible once you decide to take the path of adventure. There's something deeply mysterious about choosing an adventurous life. Once you commit, helpers appear, and events seem to unfold in an almost magically choreographed manner. You find yourself learning, living, and loving your life in a way that you thought you'd lost forever. There is no financial gain that compares with the recovery of the best parts of yourself. Fortunately, the decision to internationalize is also a great way to get wealthy. I give you real examples of how much easier it was for me to find and profit from the real estate and other investment opportunities I came across simply by choosing to play on the very uneven playing field of developing markets. If you're worried about what's happening in your home country and you're on the fence about whether or not you should create your own plan B, Secrets of the Expat Adventure will give you clarity and inspiration to choose your own path of freedom and adventure. I promise you'll never look at your life the same way again once you discover what an international lifestyle can do for you, your family, and your wealth. To get your copy, click the link below this video. Go to any downtown in any major US city and tell me that I'm wrong. The likely outcome of all of this is that the US will become increasingly isolated from the world community. I think partly the reason we're headed for a real trouble is that nobody in control in Washington actually gets this. In their own world, in their own bubble, based on their own biases, everything is still okay. The clowns in Washington don't actually see what's happening outside their own little world. And if they do, right, they quickly and easily extract themselves and get back to, right, the business of telling other people what to do from very safe kind of headquarters, most of them on the East Coast, somewhere between Washington and New York. The money and opulence in and around DC, where I still have family, is shocking compared to some of the places in the rest of the country, like Philadelphia, downtown San Francisco, flyover states, et cetera, et cetera. The ruling class in DC thinks it can dictate terms. Now, my suspicion is that those days are going to quickly come to an end, and in a certain way, good riddance, right? It's actually good. The entire world will be better off when reality finally intrudes, and Washington elites can no longer order people around and sort of cause the problems that they've caused in the last several decades. But the entire older generation may have to die off before that happens and before their ideas are finally let go. The great danger, of course, right now is that by then the damage will be done and the U.S. will be in ruins. Now, I'm not cheering for this. Just to be clear, my purpose in doing videos like this is to try to talk sense to people who will listen, and to give you solutions for what you could do instead of being part of that kind of tragedy. Secondly, the so-called good guys are also to blame, and this is something that nobody wants to talk about, but finding fault with lunatic blue-haired lesbians who shriek and hyperventilate about inequality or climate change, et cetera, doesn't require a lot of thinking. That's a little like punching a retarded kid on the playground, right? There's nothing particularly prideful or boastful about that kind of thing. It's easy to understand why these people are a real problem, right? If your stated position is that you're against the place where you live and that you hate the people and the ideas and the values that made it great, obviously that is a problem. But my comment here is to call out the so-called good guys. It's too obvious to point out the fact that left-leaning socialism is insane. But even that statement doesn't really help because, as my pal Alex Crony pointed out, who happened to grow up in communist Yugoslavia, the jousting match between capitalism and socialism is just another misdirection as well. And if you think about it, the people who exhort the benefits of capitalism never seem to notice or publicly deride the fact that the crony capitalist version of our economic system that we have today isn't really about a free market in anything, right? There is no free market anywhere. I mean, you have to look really hard to find a place where the government has not inserted itself and distorted everything by putting its thumb on the scale. When losses accrue, they are socialized. That's not capitalism, right? If the state is going to give away trillions in fake money, wouldn't it be better in everybody's interest to offer that lucre to the little people? A grassroots kind of bailout that alleviates class warfare and lets individuals spend in their own best interest. Obviously, that's a mental exercise. I'm not personally in favor of free anything because it never turns out to be free and it always degrades the recipients. But Crony has a good point to make when he says that. The real issue nobody wants to bring up about why the U.S. is headed toward war and dissolution is how the good guys are also guilty of bringing about the problems threatening to sink our society into an all-out, no-holds-barred war of all against all. There's so much to be said about this that it's actually hard to know where to begin. But JFK was not shot from behind. Ergo, the Warren Commission lied. And anyone with eyes to watch the Zapruder film can see this for themselves. Robert McNamara admitted on camera before he died, to his credit, that the Gulf of Tonkin incident was a false flag and that it didn't really happen at all the way it was sold to the American public. And so he had a huge, terrible conflagration of about 8 or 9 or 10 or 12 years, depending on when you say it started and when it actually ended, in Southeast Asia, blowing up and killing people in that part of the world for absolutely no reason that anybody could cite when it was ended. The USS Liberty was not accidentally bombed by Israel. It was done with the full knowledge of LBJ to bring the U.S. into the war against Egypt. And the survivors had done nothing but speak the truth since 1967. And the U.S. government has done nothing but censor them since that time. World Trade Center 7, of course, did not fall down on its own from an office fire. It was blown up from within. Anybody can see this. The owner of the World Trade Center bought terrorism insurance mere months before that fateful day in September 2001, when the whole world changed forever. The so-called dancing Israelis, filmed celebrating after the planes hit the towers and apprehended by the FBI, though they were later released, played some kind of role in the events of that day. We will never find out, just like we will never apparently find out who was part of the Epstein pedophilia ring as well, so don't hold your breath. COVID, of course, was not a real disease from the wet market from a bat in Wuhan, and the jabs were not real vaccines, et cetera, right? I could go on and on. The point is, the good guys are not good at all, and they too are in on it. They too are guilty of the bullshit that has put the U.S. on the verge of extinction. State power will always be thus. It doesn't matter who wields it. The power of the state is the power to commit aggressive violence with others and to perpetrate fraud in the form of currency debasement with total legal impunity. Only the rarest of human beings can resist that temptation. No one in power today fits that description. Those who wish to do what the U.S. by unchecked immigration and the endless litany of race and gender equality are mostly just plain stupid. But the people on the inside who know better and yet continue to lie and commit violence and fraud are the truly bad ones. Who knows? Maybe they're just plain stupid too, but the refusal to acknowledge any notion of a just God means that there is no right and wrong, and therefore no such thing as bad behavior, and therefore anything goes. That's how you create hell on earth, and it's almost here. Whatever name you give it, there is an invisible ledger in the universe somewhere. Those who commit wrongs against others will eventually get to endure the unpleasant experience of having the score being leveled. The reason you don't murder other people is not because you can't get away with it. It's because you can't get away from who you become once you commit such an act. Your main concern right now, while you still have any power to choose, is that you're going to get what they deserve. So plan accordingly. Don't pay for the crimes of the leadership in Washington and New York. You and I may not have much in the way of influence over the great affairs playing out in our time, but you do have the power to choose how you will react to these events. If you want to quickly get up to speed on how I put together a tried and tested Plan B, please click the link below and check out my Bulletproof Plan B. And if you'd like to speak to me personally, I offer free 15-minute consultations to figure out how we can create a plan that helps you preserve your physical safety of yourself and your loved ones, and also how you're going to preserve your wealth through the coming chaos. Thanks very much. I'll be back with more great stuff. Remember, of all the ways to avoid the coming chaos, the best one is get out of town.